Hello and welcome to the Michael Mamas Show. I'm your host, Michael Mamas, and we're coming to you from Mount Soma, home of the Sri Someshwara Temple in the mountains of Western North Carolina. And today will be, I think, a pretty interesting topic. We're going to talk about like the universe, the shape of the universe, all kind of viewed from the eyes of Brahman, you know. Before we start, though, there's a nice little quote. Who did it? Carl Jung. And he said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. It's a nice quote. I don't know that you call it fate, though. I think people would probably call it their own judgment, their own conscious mind. Because it's like whatever's going on in the subconscious runs the conscious mind, but the conscious mind thinks that their conclusions are rational and appropriate, moral, what have you. Not really even feeling like it is anything other than their conscious mind, you know. And in the Vedic tradition, the word for that is the chit, the storehouse of impressions, that Maharishi Patanjali spoke about. And those impressions that are stored in the subconscious mind, you know, are what determine how we think, how we feel. And by and large, people aren't in touch with that, you know. Anyway.
By the way, Michael, when I try to talk about that with my kids all the time.
Really? Yeah.
You know, because my one son, like the other day, we went for a mountain bike ride, and he had like a bad kind of an experience where he ran into something and he got frustrated, and you know, and now anytime we'd say let's go on a ride, it's like, you know, there was, you know, I tell him, hey, you had this tremendous impression on you that's leaving. It doesn't mean that every time is going to be like that. And that's what we're talking about with that chit stuff, you know.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm right in introducing to that, or am I, you know, wasting breath?
That's an interesting question. You know, how do you know if it's your chit or actually, you know, your conscious mind?
Yeah.
By and large, you don't. But I think one indication is kind of like the nature of the response. If it's sort of like a knee-jerk, kind of like an impulsive, emotional, you can feel it, you know, it kind of feels like it's just not coming from a very settled place, not coming from the depth of your being, but coming from somewhere else, you know. And that's, you know, there's more to it even than that, because there are some things that are truly dangerous and frightening and like that, and we're going to have a impulsive response to it, you know. But from what you're saying, I think you kind of feel like he just kind of got an impression there.
Yeah.
And it would be good, you know, if we have an association with something that's good and positive and safe and all that, it'd be kind of a shame to avoid it because of subconscious mind telling us something that's not really valid, you know.
Yeah.
You know, another example, there was, let me see, I don't want to use, there were some people I know, and one of them got hurt really badly, caught in an automobile accident. And one of the other people just felt really guilty, like it was their fault. And if maybe they could have done something, and, you know, if only they, you know, did this or did that, it wouldn't happen. They were feeling guilt about it. And people asked me about it. And the thing is, when you have something, because the person that got hurt they died, and when something like that happens, it's not just random chance. The course of our lives and major events like that in our life, those things are very karmic, predetermined, if you will, and we can feel into that in the depth of our being and kind of make the sense out of it. But if it's too emotionally charged, if it's got too much feeling around it, it's hard to do that. And oftentimes what people do then is they kick up into a more superficial level of their life, which is the mind. The mind is superficial. It's a great tool. It's a terrible master. And so they'll create these rationales, these hypotheticals, and torture themselves with it. And so in times like that, it's a good idea if you can, even just having that knowledge, I think, is comforting and good. But if we can look past the surface, you can justify anything with the intellect. People do. And if the chit is what's running your thoughts and your minds and your emotions and all like that, it's no way to live, kind of along the same lines, huh, Scotty? Is what you're talking about there.
Well,
yeah.
I guess is, like when you're trying to work with somebody or show them that, or bring awareness to what is the best way,
Say that again. When you're working with somebody, what?
Yeah, when you're working with somebody or talking to somebody about it, just to bring awareness about it, what way would you do that?
The thing is, it's difficult.
Yeah,
because we don't feel like it's something outside of our conscious mind. We feel like it's what we think, it's what we feel, it's what our passion is. It's all we're so identified with those thought patterns, those emotional patterns, that it's hard to punch your way out of that, Teflon bag, and I heard something that I thought was quite wise. It's like, people function from, where they're at. They function from their, level of consciousness. And you can't really talk them down from that, it's maybe even abusive to try, I don't know. So there's a finesse to it. It's not like you don't say anything, you don't do anything, but you have to kind of get a sense or a feel for, how hard you can push that. Because people basically, people are at wherever it is they're at, and that's it, Again, you can work with it, you can kind of coax it in a direction, support it in a direction, and give some knowledge, but you got to know when enough is enough,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've been just trying to work with my kids on some of the things, to just hopefully start them young enough that they're aware of it. But I don't know if I'm just, again.
I mean, I think every parent, I can certainly identify with that, Scotty. I mean, you want so much to help your kids, and if you feel like you can give them a deeper understanding or a better relationship with something, you try.
Yeah.
But again, if you push them too hard, I mean, I think isn't that a big reason why, kids tend to separate from their parents at a certain stage, adolescence or what have you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tired of hearing it.
Yeah, they're tired of hearing it. Yeah. Yeah. But, we love them so much that it's hard to back off when you really feel like you have something that you could help them with, and they just don't want to hear it. It's tough,
All right.
Anyway, gee, where to start here? I had so much going on this week and so many interesting things as far as the knowledge goes that I didn't really know where to start, and I wasn't even sure where to draw the line. It's kind of like it's just too much, you know. So we'll just start where we do and see how it goes. I don't think we'll get to everything because, again, this is probably enough for a whole lecture series. But we'll talk a little bit about the manifestation here of existence and the nature of Brahman. Let's talk about the nature of Brahman. You know, there's an interesting thing here because it's how we process things that determine what we see. And really within the deeper levels of existence, within the unified field, they're just these vibrations, these oscillations, these patterns of movement, if you will, of sound pulsations. And so the way that affects the senses is you can see something different. In other words, I talk about the pillow and I am that pillow and things like that. But the pillow, if there's no observer, in a sense, the pillow doesn't really exist. Without an observer, it's pulsations within the unified field or on the surface there. So it's the nature the way we process those pulsations has a lot to do with the nature of the reality we perceive. And those, and I think it's just an important point to reflect upon, you know. But also, the manifest existence has to do with thingness. It's there's Shiva, which is pure silence, pure no thingness. Kind of relates to space, just pure space. And then there's his Prakriti is some people say consort wife, and those words are really right. But Shiva's Prakriti is Parvati. And so it's all of material existence, you could say, is Parvati. But nevertheless, there's an interdependence between Shiva and Parvati, you know. It's like you can't have one without the other. And the neat thing is in Sanskrit, I'm just so into Sanskrit now. It's just such a fascinating language, the way it's all structured. And I've gone into talking about the vowels and how the vowels are an open throat, whereas consonants are like k. And there's a closed component to it, k, 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 or j, j, or n, n, you know. But when you look at the Sanskrit letters, there is no such thing as k in that sense. It's ka or ja, or even it can end with another vowel. And keep in mind then that vowels, from my previous talks, vowels are the sounds, but they're still within the absolute. They're those pulsations within the absolute that are foundational to the structure that underlies all of relative existence. And so with respect to the Shiva Parvati, that's why it's not k, it's ka. So you have both. You have the concrete, the consonant k, and then you have a, because why? Because it's rooted in unboundedness. Everything is rooted in unboundedness. You and your essential nature are that unboundedness. I am, this is, the pillow is, everything is. And I think it's just beautiful that, in the Sanskrit language, that's how the very sounds are created. That's their very nature. And in fact, when we go from one sound to the next, one word to the next, one syllable to the next, one thing to the next, it starts with the concrete, you could say, the pillow, and then before you move to the next or whatever, we go into the unboundedness, the no thingness component. So the gap between syllables, between words, even in the Vedic cognitions, Agni Mile Prohitam, between each of those sounds, there's the gap. And within that gap, that's where the Brahmanas are, the structuring value, but it's within the absolute, within within fully open throat. And I talked about how the whole structure of the physiology and how we make our voice and our sounds and all that are such beautiful reflection and have such seamless correlation with the manifestation of existence itself, how those sounds emerge from the absolute, you see? Does that make sense, Scotty?
Yes.
Okay.
Do the consonants collapse it down into point values?
You could say the consonants are the point value.
Yeah.
And then they collapse down into unboundedness. You could say it like that. And then within unboundedness, there's this value called, Smrti, memory. In fact, even within the absolute, Smrti is what connects the whole self-interacting dynamic within the absolute. And then as things emerge into the relative and become sound, Shruti, they still have that memory, that Smrti value that keeps them connected to the absolute. It's Ka. And then when it goes back into the absolute, there's still the momentum, there's still that memory. So it comes up sequentially from A to Ga to Ni to Agni Mile Puro into the whole relative unfoldment and sequentiality of relative existence. It's really quite beautiful. So the knowledge is there. And now we can take a look at, they talk about, this applies on all levels. And we can talk about the creation and dissolution of the universe. Everything cycles, sun rises, sun sets, electrons pulsate. Also, and it's long periods of time, nothing we need to worry about. But over long periods of time, the totality of the universe returns back into the absolute with the same kind of principles that we just talked about. And they talk about an expanding universe. The universe just is ever expanding. So what happens when it goes into dissolution, when it ceases to be? What is that dynamic? What's going on there? Well, as it expands, it kind of like thins out. And we'll look at it a little more carefully, but it kind of like thins out. And it becomes more and more etheric, if you will, until it gets to the point where it sort of just like evaporates or just merges back into the absolute. Now, I don't know how true this is. I think it's pretty accurate. But they talk about the earth spirits, elves, leprechauns, all like that. And they say that they're not really part of this physical world. But the idea is that there's a time when they were. And what happened, though, is that group consciousness, that level of existence, the community of elves and leprechauns and stuff like that, if you will, became more and more etheric, less and less physical, more and more etheric, until the point where we couldn't physically see them the way we used to be able to as actual physical beings. But now here's the point, is that within their own world, within their own arena, they haven't really changed. They still have their world, and it feels the same. And that kind of thing is what happens in with the dissolution of the universe. Does that make sense, Scotty?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's pretty interesting.
A lot of people happy.
What's that?
Makes a lot of people happy that there's still that realm, even though you can't see it.
Oh, yeah. And then that's where they talk about subtle sight, because as the physiology refines, then you can see more and more refined levels of existence, and that's called, subtle sense perception, subtle sight, like that. But now the other thing is that to talk about the universe from the perspective of Brahman. We talked about how, you look at the pillow, you are the pillow, and somehow all knowledge of everything is contained within the pillow. So that pillow is the source of everything, or conversely, you could say that the totality is the source of the pillow. It goes both ways. And so, but that pillow, you see the value of it, where it's God. That pillow is the one thing that's a source of everything. It's one with God, as it says in the Bible, we're all one with God. And then anything you look at, though, take the room, it's kind of like you can see, it's almost like it's virtual. And you can see that there's something beyond it. And you could say that's consciousness, and it's slightly etched on the face of consciousness, the face of being, however you want to say it. But it takes on like a virtual quality. Now, in Brahman consciousness, you can put your awareness on whatever level, all the way out to the edges of the universe. And what does that look like? It looks like a Hiranyagarbha, and they talk about this in all different religions, the cosmic egg, But now here's an interesting thing. When you think of the cosmic egg and what it looks like, it kind of emerges and then goes around kind of like an apple, and then it goes back into the core. But there's a what we call the physical world. It's almost like just on the surface there. And it comes out and goes around to an extent. So it's like a flower. And then even though there's something there, it's not physical. You don't see it. But there's nevertheless, in that state, you know it's there. And in fact, the whole Hiranyagarbha, within the Hiranyagarbha itself, not just on this surface, but the whole apple, there's that quality. And so really the manifest universe is just a thin little flower, that just doesn't even go all the way around. And it's really, I love talking to Panditji. These Vedic pundits, man, they have so much knowledge, and it's just so great to have them and to be able to talk with them. And like I said, there are only 1,000 of them in the whole planet. But I brought it up to him, and I was saying, because I was trying to think, in physics, is that what they call dark matter? I don't know if it is or not. I don't even know if dark matter is real. I get an idea what they're talking about, but if the James Webb Telescope has told us anything, it's told us that modern physicists don't know what's going on. But at any rate, Panditji, when I described it to him, I said it's kind of like the absolute, but it still has some relative component. And I'm trying to figure out what it is. And he said, did I tell you what he said, Scotty?
No.
Did I talk to you about this? I can't remember. He said
No.
it's a Mahakali.
No.
And when he said that, if you know anything about Kali, you know, I was like, wow, that is so cool. I mean, it's so perfect, you know, because it's like the gateway to nothingness, but it's not nothingness. It's that deepest level of relativity. And so then to go into more detail about in Brahman, and you see there's the Patanjali Yoga Sutras, Maharishi Patanjali, and in the Pangas, he gave the techniques for Sanyama and that. And so it's a meditation technique. And when you do that, you can do different things. And one thing you can do is you can see the shape of the universe. And in fact, that's what it looks like. And then right in the core, kind of like in the center of the apple, there's a little place, I don't know, that glows. It's bright and shimmery. It's bright light. And it's kind of like it's the source of the whole process. And so I asked Punnaji, is there anything like that in the Vedic literature? And he said, yeah. He said, it's gold. And I just thought that was so cool, you know, and it's so right. I mean, it just feels so right. It's gold. And, you know, sometimes they say, you know, gold is Shiva. Sometimes they say gold is Lakshmi. And both are valid. You know, everything merges at a point value based on their own attributes. You know, when it gets more and more subtle, that's the value it takes on more and more. And I just thought that was so perfect. That's the Hiranyagarbha, and that's the origin and dissolution of the universe. And it goes on, cycles forever. Now, so the question becomes then, what about souls? When the universe goes away, what happens to you? What happens to your individuality? Do you cease to exist? Well, in the relative you do, but there's the Smriti value. And so you're eternal. You still exist within the absolute. And then when the universe reemerges, you can reemerge back into the next universe, if you will.
Michael, is it like a bigger birth death cycle then?
Yeah, that's all there is to it. It's
like
you know, the cycling of an electron, the sun rises and sets, the moon every month, you know. And that's just the way the universe is set up. Everything cycles, even the existence of the universe, you know. So I've been doing a really cool thing. Tony Nader, he's with Maharshi for years, and he's an MD, PhD, brilliant guy. And he wrote a book about the Ramayana, you know, the story of Lord Rama and his wife Sita, his brother, you know, Lakshmana, you know, the whole thing. And what he did, because he's this brilliant physiologist, really neurophysiology, wow. And he analyzed the brain, and he did this, you know, in conjunction under the guidance of Maharishi. And he found that, you know, what different parts of the brain correspond to. And he did a series of lectures. He's got a book, and he talks about it. And, you know, I'm a veterinarian. We got a lot of neurophysiology. In fact, when I was in vet school, we were lucky to have this guy. He was a brilliant professor. I understand he learned 7 languages just so he could translate the latest literature on neurophysiology from all the different sources. And they would call him into, even when they were doing brain surgery in the human hospital, you know, they'd call him in to scrub in with them to consult, because he was just brilliant. And I mean, he gave us stacks of notes and things to read. It was a hard course because there were just such a huge volume. And I learned a lot. Now, this goes back decades, and I forgot most of it, you know. But here's the thing. Studying how beautifully the structure of the human physiology is just a reflection, a full expression, really. You know, Aham Sharira, right? I am the body. Aham Vishvam, I am the universe. Well, this is how the body is. I am the Veda. How the body is such a full expression of the values within the absolute, and how it maps so directly through the Ramayana. There's, just as an example, you know, there's the cerebral spinal fluid, right, Scotty? And it goes from the brain and runs down the spinal cord, right? And along either side of it, there are these little nuclei of gray matter. And for many reasons, that gray matter correlates to the rishis. And so now what do you have? Even in the it's just incredible. Even in the physiological mapping, the rishis are what? Sitting along the Ganges as the cerebral spinal fluid, which is created up higher in the brain, drips down like rain, drop by drop, into the cerebral spinal fluid, and then runs down. And the Ganges, and along the side banks of the Ganges, we have the tradition of rishis. And the whole brain, like even the arteries, they come out of the heart. And what's the heart? Well, the heart is Lakshmi, right? Mahalakshmi. But out of the heart, there are these blood vessels, and these blood vessels bifurcate. You know, they split up and they divide into a blood vessel going this way and then that one breaks, splits up going this way, and this one goes this way, and to vascularize the whole body. And the correlation between where a blood vessel goes, an artery goes, how many branches it has, and what it feeds, and what that, for example, in it's feeding the brain, what part of the brain it feeds, and what that part of the brain has to do with, and how that correlates to, you know, blood, arteries, you know, that's mother, right? Feeding. And so it feeds that part of the brain that correlates to the sons of that particular woman that is depicted in the Ramayana. And it, and so you can hear that and you go, oh, well, that's coincidence and stuff like that. But you go more and more into the detail in this study, and I learned more about neurophysiology from studying this in context of the Itihas of the Ramayana than I think I learned from that whole course from that great neurophysiologist. In fact, Tony made this comment at one point where he said that neurophysiologists, you know, and he said particularly ones from India who are familiar with the Ramayana, you know, he said if they studied this, they'd learn a lot more about the neurophysiology. And he's very humble in the way he says things, but he said it. And my own experience is, I mean, I was like, yeah, man, that's right, you know. And I would love to there's so much I'd love to teach. I mean, these podcasts are just one, you know, each of these things are like whole classes, whole lecture series. And in these podcasts, I just touch base on them, and I like to give, you know, the basic concept in that. And so I think they're of value. And I think, so what I like to do is kind of give the whole thing a context. You're not going to become a Sanskrit scholar. I'm not a Sanskrit scholar, but you're not going to become a Sanskrit scholar from these podcasts, but it gives you a feeling for the nature of the thing and what it's all about. And it's just so inspiring, and it's just so beautiful, you know. One thing in the Ramayana talks about how Vishnu, it's a long story, but one of the rishis prayed to Vishnu. He wanted a son that was like Vishnu, and you know, thousands of years, and then Vishnu finally says, well, I can't do that for you, because if he was like Vishnu, then he would be Vishnu. So I will manifest, you know, kind of sort of thing. And so he manifested, and he manifested as Rama and his brothers in that. But Rama himself is only 50% of Vishnu, and his other two brothers were 25%, something like that. And so when on one level you hear that and you say, oh, bummer, you know, I thought Rama was full incarnation. He's only 50% Vishnu. But then there's this beautiful verse in the Upanishads. I think I went over it with you guys in a previous podcast. And I don't know. It's like fullness emerges, and then from fullness comes fullness, but what remains is still fullness. And it's like that. So that, yeah, okay, he's 50% Vishnu, but he's still the fullness of Vishnu, you know, and he's Brahman. Rama is Brahman. And the whole evolution of the physiology, even embryologically speaking, emerges and reaches out and blossoms in the cerebral cortex and all. And what you've got then is the totality of existence in the human physiology. And that's Rama. Rama is the totality. And so if you just understand the human physiology, then what happens is you know, and you refine the physiology so it's all functioning as it's designed to, then what happens is you are Brahman. You are one with the totality. But Brahman, interestingly enough, Brahman isn't a thing. Brahman isn't a Brahman isn't a material thing like Atman is, even though it's unmanifest, it's a thing. Brahman is a state of consciousness. What a remarkable thing Brahman is. What a remarkable thing it is that the human physiology says, and we have the capability of evolving to the point where we have an awareness of the totality, which means that, okay, you sense the absolute, you sense the transcendent, you sense pure being, if you will, and all of relativity is just lightly etched on the face of being. At the same time, that pillow is the one thing that's the source of everything. And so is this, and so is that, and so is everything. Anything is everything, you know? And in Brahman consciousness, that's just your living reality. And needless to say, it takes some getting used to. It just doesn't happen. It's like, okay, great. It can take decades to just get used to living and not just living, but fully appreciating that level of life, fully understanding what's even going on with your awareness. It's just so vast and so huge. So now, one more thing, and that is, let's talk a little bit about the planes of existence within the Hiranyagarbha, within relativity. And I think the best way to describe that is something, if you have a piece of crystal, a quartz crystal or what have you, you might be familiar with this, that sometimes in a piece of natural quartz crystal, they're like, they call them windows. They're like little, you can't really see them physically in the crystal, except that, like, if you shine a light from a certain angle, then they kind of show up, and they can even maybe display the spectrum of lights like a prism, the red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet, like that. But it's like a little plane. And those planes, appear to be two-dimensional. In this whole universe, our whole universe, you could say, is just a window pane in our universe. But now knowledge only goes so far, because that little pane has the three-dimensionality of this universe. And somewhere else, there's another plane with very different laws of nature. There's a different loka. And what is between those different planes? Mahakali. So we're functioning in this, what we call our world. It's just one little plane within the Hiranyagarbha. That makes sense, Scotty?
Yeah. Yes, it does.
It's beautiful, isn't it?
Yeah.
And you see, the point is, in Brahman consciousness, you have that experience. But, like, what do you do with it? It takes time. It's like, okay, this is all lightly etched on the face of being, but I can sense there's something past it. And so, like, when even Panditji, saying, oh, it's Mahakali, it's like, yeah, and so you're constantly, here's what I'm trying to say, I guess, you're constantly trying to put together an understanding of your experience. And that process, I think, goes on forever, All right. Unless there's something else, Scotty, I think we're good for now.
So much more. but yeah.
What's that?
I said there's so much more you can go with that. It's
oh, yeah.
There's not enough time.
Yeah, I think a glance is about all you can do,
Yeah.
Okay, everybody. Well, thanks for listening, and we will talk with you again next